Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. So, one of the things I love to do is to meet interesting people, particularly people that are entrepreneurs and running interesting companies. And during COVID-19, probably there's got to be no more interesting and challenge company, I would have thought, than home healthcare. And so I wanted to reach out to a very impressive young lady. Sandra Ketchen is her name, and she is the CEO of Spectrum Healthcare. Sandra, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. It's great to be here.
Good. So Sandra is an interesting individual. She, as I mentioned, is president and CEO of Spectrum Healthcare. Spectrum is one of the largest providers of home care and specialized services in Ontario. Sandra has a proven track record of using data and technology to drive outcomes that matter to patients and their families. She's an advocate for integrated care solutions that give patients control over where they receive care and how they age. She has led Spectrum through the COVID-19 pandemic and continues this work with her team, providing innovative operational solutions to the challenges facing the home care sector today. She's got an MBA from the Schulich School of Business and a Bachelor of Arts in Science in Chemical Engineering from the University of Waterloo. Sandra, tell me, it's got to have been an incredible challenge running this business during COVID-19.
Certainly it was. It has been and continues to be. If I reflect on the day that I started actually at Spectrum was the day that we were sending everybody home from the office. People were worried about having caregivers come into their home. People were worried about actually going into people's homes to provide the care. We didn't know a lot about the pandemic at the time. And so, we were just focused on what we needed to do to keep everybody safe. That focus has continued through the last 2 years, and every wave that we've gone through has just been a little bit different. But certainly we went from a point of being, maybe 15 to 20% down on demand just because of all the conditions I talked about, to a situation now where we're at least 15% higher in volume versus before the pandemic. And there's so much demand coming at the sector. We frankly just don't have the staff to service the need that's out there.
Tell me, what is home care? Is that, primarily taking care of elderly people that are staying at home? What is home care?
It's one of those mystery sectors that people don't actually know about until and unless you've had the unfortunate need to tap into it. It is a silent army of probably, tens of thousands of frontline staff, nurses, personal support workers, therapists, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, providing care to about 700,000 Ontarians every year through about 60 million hours of visits.
700,000, you said?
Roughly, yeah. So in Spectrum, we're focused in the Greater Toronto area. We have about 25,000 clients we serve every year. We do about 75,000 visits a week. And it's continuing to grow. The need continues to grow. But as I said, unless you've actually had the need to have home care, you don't often even know it exists. And it does. We do lots of different things. We do everything from chronic disease management, helping people live with CHF, COPD. We do post-surgical wound care. If you've been in hospital for heart surgery, you might come into the care of a home care nurse to help you with your wounds, help you with your recovery. Maybe you're in palliative care, unfortunately, and you're in the process of that. We have nurses and personal support workers and therapists that will come and help you manage that journey, help your caregivers manage that journey right up to the point of end of life if you choose to pass away at home. So it's a myriad of things, but I would say the bulk of what we do, 60 to 65%, our work with frail seniors, really helping them maintain independence, activities of daily living, because we know most people want to stay at home as long as they possibly can.
Is it primarily nurses or what? What's your staff?
It's so again, different home care providers have kind of different mixes. We have predominantly personal support workers and a significant nursing contingent. There's a lot of providers out there that might have a larger contingent of therapists, occupational physio, speech language dietitians. It's really kind of a mosaic, if you will, across the province. And we work jointly and in collaboration with our government partners, the Home and Community Care Support Services arm of the ministry, to help deliver this care in whatever way is required.
So I got to ask you a personal question. So I recently had surgery, and my biggest challenges have been putting my socks on, showering, and getting stuff to the table. What should I have done? Should I have called you?
Well, certainly if you need help, if you need help and you're not eligible for home care, there's lots of private options in the province as well. And unfortunately, not everybody can afford those private options. Many people can, and many people take advantage of them, but not everybody has the opportunity to do that. Oftentimes we're working with homes where there is another caregiver in the home. In my case, if I was having surgery, I'd sort of be on my own too, and reliant on my children to come by and take pity on me. But in all seriousness, there are many seniors out there that they're dealing with post-surgical situations. They're dealing with, just ongoing activities of daily life situations, and they are doing it all by themselves. We are the only people sometimes that some of our patients actually see on a day-to-day basis.
And I think you're right that, people do want to stay at home. A lot of people do. I have a 90-year-old mother who was in a big 2-story house, and she keeps on thinking about whether she should move out, but she loves her house. She loves her ravine. She loves her independence, and she wants to stay at home. And I think a lot of people are like that. And as the demographics age, we're going to have more and more people within that community. And we just don't have the kind of long-term care facilities that can house them all. And frankly, given what's happened in long-term care in the last year and a half, I don't know if I'd ever want to be in one of those facilities. I'd rather have someone from your institution come and take care of me at home.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, during the pandemic, I actually think that's one of the things that was really good for our sector in a way. It sounds kind of odd, but just the profile that it brought for home care, that it was the safest place for people to be. And I understand in some situations and circumstances, it's not always possible to keep people at home, and it is necessary at some points in a journey and for a family to put their loved one in long-term care. And I know how heart-wrenching that can be. But at the same time, I also think people became more aware of, that there were other options, that it is the safer place, that they don't have to necessarily leave when they thought that they did. We did a survey through the Home Care Ontario Association that said 96% of people aged 55 and above, when they were asked the question of, where do you want to be? Where do you want to stay? That quantity, most of all of the people were asked, they want to live, age, and even potentially pass away at home. They want to stay home.
I think that's true. I think a lot of people do. I had the honor of being with 2 different people, 2 different family members that passed away at home. The whole family sort of in the extended house, not necessarily in the room. If you got to go, it's not a bad way, a lot better than being alone in a hospital room or an old folks home.
For sure. And I mean, just on a personal note, my father was diagnosed with cancer and was deemed, terminal in April of 2021, and he passed away less than 6 weeks later. But, it was a lot about discussion and choice. I mean, I think that's important for families to have those hard conversations. He and my mom obviously had talked a lot about what his wishes were. He wanted to stay at home. He was adamant, and especially with COVID, right, where people were dying in hospital and saying goodbye to their families over Zoom screens. I can't even imagine. And so, again, this amazing team of a palliative care doctor from the Temi Latner Foundation out of Sinai Hospital, combined with our government home care funder providers, in coordination with an amazing home care staff, which, yes, they were Spectrum home care people, but it was a nurse and a couple of personal support workers that helped that journey in the last 6 weeks. And, to the point that my mom, my 2 brothers, and I could all be there when my dad really just went to sleep. And it was the best possible way to go in the circumstance, and it certainly met what his wishes were. And my fervent hope is that we can make those wishes be the same for anyone that chooses to want to have that journey.
We're chatting tonight with Sandra Ketchen. She is the CEO of Spectrum Healthcare. It's a home healthcare provider. We're going to be taking a break now for some commercial messages, and I come back and chat with Sandra a little bit more about healthcare and the industry and where it's going and the role that she plays in it. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Sandra Ketchen. She is the CEO of Spectrum Healthcare. And I think you said you had 25,000 employees in the Greater Toronto area?
We have about 2,500 employees servicing about 25,000 clients every year.
2,500 employees. That's a big operation.
It's a big operation. We're focused primarily in the Greater Toronto area. We have some smaller private pay offices out in the, areas of places like Ottawa and Hamilton. But, predominantly we service Greater Toronto Area.
So I got to tell you a little bit about Sandra because she's got a pretty impressive resume. So she has been president and CEO of Spectrum Healthcare since March of 2020, I guess right around the beginning of the pandemic, as you mentioned. She's a board member of the Mackenzie Innovation Institute, which is committed to build and develop the advanced technological infrastructure necessary to support innovations in health. And so that'll be interesting to chat a little bit about it with. You are also a member of the board of advisors of Convergence Tax. You're a board member of NGN Canada. You're a board member of Venture Lab. My God, four different board memberships. Prior to her current position with Spectrum Healthcare, she was Senior Vice President of Operations with SE Health. She was a Senior Vice President, Consumer and Electronics, and a Senior Vice President, Products with ATS Automation, Inc. She was a Vice President of Healthcare and a Vice President, General Manager, and a Director of Manufacturing Operations with Celestica, Inc. For about 10 years. And she's got, as she mentioned, a MBA with the University of Toronto Rotman School of Management. No, that's wrong. I apologize. You got a Institute Director.
You look at York, yeah.
with Rotman. You've got an MBA with Schulich, a master's in engineering, civil engineering from McMaster, and a Bachelor of Arts and Science with the University of Waterloo. Really quite an impressive resume.
It's been a journey, and people sometimes ask me, Brian, how did I end up in home care? I started out, the first 20 years plus in engineering and manufacturing and operations, and how does somebody end up in home care? But I upon reflection, I say to people, I had an amazing experience joining SE Health. It used to be known as St. Elizabeth Healthcare. And a lot of what home care does, it is a lot about a supply chain problem. And that's really what I've spent my entire career doing, solving global supply chain problems. This is just a very, very special kind of supply chain. It's about trying to get the right people with the right skills to the right patient at the right time to provide the right highest possible level quality of care, and trying to do that as efficiently as we possibly can. And just recognizing, we're not building factory widgets. We're dealing with people and human emotion and families and loved ones, and outcomes and experiences really matter. And that's a lot of what we do and what we focus on.
You're a board member of 3 different institutes that sound like they're about innovation in healthcare. Why?
Well, it's partly like when I was doing my last, 5 years or so at Celestica, I ran the medical devices division, or restarted, I guess you could say. And that's kind of where I fell in love with the sector. It was something that I could relate to. It was something that I could get my head wrapped around, what kind of impact we were having. And as I've gone through my career, I think it became more important to me. And so, when I left that sector and I went into the home care sector, it was important to me to keep that linkage to my prior life, if you will, staying connected to what's happening in innovation and engineering and technology, through the work that NGen is doing, right? Trying to position Canada as a manufacturing center globally, with global excellence. We have amazing companies here. Medical in nature, healthcare in nature, but also, a ton of other industries, and trying to help through that board raise the profile. Just some amazing folks out there doing those things. So it was my way to stay connected and also keep fresh in my mind ideas that I see those places that we can bring into home care and apply, because that's where I think innovation really takes place, is the intersection of things that you wouldn't normally put together.
I used to be CFO of a medical device company, so I know a little bit about that sector as well. One of the interesting things about that intersection that you're talking about is wearables, that there are so many different things that people are doing themselves, in fact, even wearing, that are providing healthcare information that go either to themselves or go to their parents or their kids or go to their doctors. What do you think about that whole trend?
I see it live in my house on a daily basis, because my children have their wearables, and they're always like looking at their rings and their circles. And, from the standpoint of keeping people active, getting people active, almost making a bit of a competitive fun kind of thing, I think that's great. That's amazing. And all the wearables and the technology. that you can get from that. Like from a data perspective, what we're doing with that data ultimately, and what it's going to teach us about our health and our outcomes and where we're headed on our life trajectory. I think that will be something that I'm looking forward to understanding how those data points will be applied to give us some meaningful information about what kinds of things we could be doing to change. I think more in the home care world, it's less about the wearables and more about sort of situation specific tools that are going to enable us to maybe do some remote monitoring that helps us intervene and drive better outcomes because we're getting to the point of intervention faster. We're able to, maybe know that patient named Sally in her home is on a rising risk trajectory. And so because we've got these monitoring devices in the home, so we're not waiting for, a recipe of when we're supposed to visit Sally. We can pick up the phone and call Sally and say, hey, I think something's going on here. Tell us, how are you doing? How are you feeling? I think it's a generational thing too. Certainly, my parents weren't going to be the wearable type, but they would have definitely, and they would be definitely. My mother still would be a candidate for one day maybe having a remote monitoring technology in her home that's going to help her stay safe, because that's really what it's about for our seniors. I think keeping them safe and intervening faster.
I got to tell you, I got a call from my 90-year-old mother this past week, and she was irate that her internet was down. And she says, how can you believe that for a senior, I can exist without my internet? Because I play bridge on the internet. I do my chair yoga on the internet. I go to my Bible studies on the internet. That's how I interact with everyone. My internet can't be down. She was irate.
It sounds a bit like my mother, because she's an avid bridge player too. And that was the big pivot for the seniors, I think, in the bridge circles, where they went away from the in-person clubs to the online bridge world. And it is actually quite amazing if you think about the change that that generation has seen and experienced and in many ways embraced. Having said that, God bless my mother, she tries really hard. And, it's the first time in almost 84 years that she's lived by herself. And so much of this can be overwhelming. And, I think to the extent we can make these things as easy as possible for them, if we're giving them tools, we might see a lot more adoption.
So let's talk about the future of home care. What do you think is going to happen? It's got to be a hugely growing sector, is it not?
The demographic pressure is real. And if I think about, where this is going to be 10 years from now, we have got to be planning now in terms of what we're going to do with respect to workforce. And it's really not just for the home care sector, but healthcare sector at large. I think home care has been particularly challenged just because of the level of funding that we've been given over the years versus other parts of the health sector. And not to say that those other investments aren't critically important, they absolutely are. But I think that one of the things that the pandemic has done is in raising the profile of home care and the importance of it being a key part of the stool, if you will, we are starting to get, I think, more intention for investment from government. We saw them in the fall economic statement support a $550 million investment over 3 years to fund more home care. We saw them fund specific programs to try and bring health human resources through, to bear, and some of that money really earmarked and dedicated for home care. So I'm encouraged by that. But there's not a lot of brand new PSWs entering this sector. We're looking at programs to bring in internationally educated nurses. And trying to figure out how do we help and support them in bridging their license. But it is a long and complicated process that can take a couple of years. You can imagine them trying to work as a PSW in the meantime, making $19 an hour. The viability of that, it's difficult. So I think that the sector and government can work together to figure out strategies to be prepared for that longer term, 5 or 10 years. And at the same time, as we're heading toward this, transformation to Ontario health teams, I remain hopeful that there's always a better way to do something. I'm an engineer, so I just fundamentally believe in the notion of continuous improvement. But as we're going through that transformation, I think we have to be really thoughtful about how do we make sure that we maintain the stability of our workforce? How do we make sure that PSWs working in home care, doing essentially equivalent work, should be getting paid an equivalent rate to PSWs working in long-term care? So stability is really important. But that the notion of integrated care, making sure that everybody I touch in my own healthcare journey is going to understand who I am, what I'm all about, what my history is, and that's a seamless transition. I just think that the patient experience and the family experience is going to be so much better. So I'm excited about that.
You're just Greater Toronto area. Is that something you should expand out of at some point in time in the future?
Well, we're always, looking for ways to bring more impact to different parts of the province and really just different parts of Canada, to the extent that, we think we've got some capabilities that we can service need. For sure, we're keen to grow. And I mean, to be honest, Brian, home care is a lot about scale. Scale is what helps us be efficient from a cost perspective. So if you look at, there is probably 10 larger providers in Ontario today with a whole bunch of smaller providers. That scale is important because the more you've got sort of one-off local regional solutions, I just think it gets really, really difficult to provide the services at the cost points I think the province also really relies on us to provide.
You mentioned something about healthcare teams. What's that?
Ontario Health Teams?
Yes.
So that's the ultimate transformation of the current healthcare system, if you will, moving from 14 local health integrated networks today, or they became known as home and community care support services areas for home care specifically. But I think there's about 50 or so, 55 Ontario Health Teams that have been announced by the government to this point. And these are really meant to be, regional local health systems, if you will, hospitals working in partnership with long-term care, family health teams, and home care and other community support agencies to really bring good integrated care solutions to the populations that they're serving in a way that's more efficient and with better outcomes than what we have today. I think that's really ultimately the vision.
What is the what's the issue for the public at large about funding of home care? How does this impact just a regular resident of Ontario?
Well, I mean, if you haven't had the need to experience home care, you might not care about this so much today. But I think why you should is for all the reasons I think that I said already, that the demographic challenge is real. And my dad used to say, Sandra, we're all going the same direction. So it's one of those things that we don't really like to think about, but it's true. We're all aging. We're all going the same direction. And we want to be able to have the choices at the point that, when and how we get to that point of needing something and wanting to be able to stay in our homes. I'm not sure about you, but I certainly want to make sure that there's a system in place that's going to support my own ability to do that without having to rely exclusively on my children or their children to take care of me. So, I think it's in everybody's best interest to have a robust home care system that is supporting our hospital, right? The more patients that we can take that are discharging from hospital, the more flow hospitals and the more patients hospitals can see. We've got the ability to bring people that honestly don't need to be in hospital to home care faster, that we're supporting the long-term care partners as well. We're such a critical part of the stool. I think that's why it should matter to everybody that's listening to you today.
As CEO of a healthcare company, on a board member of a bunch of different companies looking at technology and healthcare, medical devices, et cetera, and your past jobs, you've had a unique opportunity to take a look at our healthcare system. What are you excited about? What are you concerned about in our healthcare system today? I'm concerned about a couple of things. Really, just the fragility of the current health human resource situation, honestly. So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about sort of maintaining equal access to care and even actually having equal access to care. Palliative care is a great example where, if you're in the Toronto area, you've got access to an amazing program, but once you get into other places in the province, you don't have the same kind of access to that same kind of program that I described earlier. So how do we make sure that we've got equal access to all of the population of Ontario in a way that keeps our health human resource stable and has the opportunity to attract new people into the sector? I had a niece that actually just graduated as a brand new PSW last year, and she's working in a long-term care home down in the Waterloo region. But she's a very unique person. There's not many people her age that would be entering this sector as a place that is
perceived as an attractive place to work, or as a place that, they can financially, be able to make a living to support themselves. So I'm concerned about those things. What excites me, I think, or what I think about is the power of technology and data to help us inform better health outcomes, to help keep people out of the system. We're working on a potential pilot program, or a test of change, I'll call it. People don't like the word pilot anymore. The test of change program, where we're trying to link up companions. We have a big companion workforce, linking up companions to frail seniors who are under the care of a primary care physician, but haven't necessarily ended up in hospital for whatever reason, but they might be at risk too. So to the extent that we can get that resource into the home, support them through some ongoing monitoring, have a great link between a primary care physician and a home care team. My fervent belief is that senior is going to have a much better outcome, because they're likely going to be able to stay in their home supported for a much greater period of time. Once they start into the system, it's hard to get them out of the system. So I'm excited by that prospect. I'm excited about what data, and the emergence of machine learning and those kinds of tools will bring us. I see what's happening down south of the border, and as much as we might think that we have a superior health system to the US, and for sure from a funding perspective and equal access to care, I think that's true. But there's some amazing examples down there where there really is very successful integrated care systems driving really great outcomes, and they're doing it with technology and data. And I think that's something that we can learn from as we're going through this transformation over the coming 5 years.
That sounds interesting. I'd love to chat with you about that a little bit more. We're going to take a break though for some messages, and then we're going to go back with Sandra Ketchen, the CEO of Spectrum Healthcare. And I'm going to ask her some personal questions about being a female in engineering and issues like that. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting today with Sandra Ketchen. She is the CEO of Spectrum Healthcare. She spent more than 25 years leading operations and strategy across business sectors focused on technology and health. And we've been discussing her home healthcare company, Spectrum, but also the challenges with COVID-19 and also some of her things she's looking forward to and things she's worried about from an healthcare standpoint in the future. Sandra, maybe we could, take a step back, elevate for a second, ask you a little bit of questions. You don't look like the typical engineer.
There's a lot of us out there that don't look like a typical engineer, for sure.
What was it like being a female in engineering?
It was a while ago, I will say. I went into engineering. People are like, how did you end up in engineering? I went into engineering mostly because I had an older brother who was in engineering, a Waterloo engineer. Back in the day, we had an agreement with my parents that we had to put ourselves through school. And so Waterloo was the only place that had a co-op program that was going to enable us to do that. And I was good at math and science. But I honestly, in hindsight, I would disclose to you, Brian, that I never really understood exactly what an engineer did. It just seemed like a good thing to do based on what I'd watched my brother do. So that's how I ended up there. And what was it like? I mean, it was there was probably, I don't know, nine women in a class of 60, and we were in chemical engineering. I'm not sure that in certain parts of engineering world today, chemical and electrical, I don't think that the ratios have changed that substantially. But it was, it was an amazing experience. And I really found that I ended up with, 50 big brothers. We were a very close-knit class. Some of them are still friends of mine to this day. And I never really felt like it was awkward. But again, I was raised in a home that always really encouraged us to do and be whatever we wanted to do and be. So it never occurred to me that, this was something strange. And I think it's carried me well throughout my career, where mostly I have been the only woman around many board tables. But, on the flip side, it makes me memorable. If I was on a sales or business development call, people would remember who I was. I was the blonde girl at the table, the only one, around a table of men.
I've had a couple of people on my show, some from engineering, that have talked about sexism, and one PhD in civil engineering who ran a very successful consulting company mentioned that how one company CEO would always ask her to go out and get the coffee. Have you faced sexism?
I have been really fortunate, I would say, Brian, in my career, that the answer to that question, generally speaking, is no. There might have been a couple of small incidents, but they were very early on in my career. I can remember being in a job interview where a guy asked me if I was planning to have children because that was going to be a problem. So this is like way, way early days. And I was just so young and naive, and I didn't even really understand or know how to answer or respond to that question. But I was very fortunate in the companies that I worked for when I started out my career, and especially Celestica. I have always will have a long-standing emotional attachment to this organization I spent 16 years at. That there was a culture of inclusion, and I just had some amazing experiences with teams all around the globe, and really never felt that. I was given every possible opportunity. The guy that gave me, it was a man that gave me my first VP title there. And, maybe Brian, he might've taken a little bit of flack in the background for doing it, but it's been mostly men that have given me the shots at the next role, the next level. And they know who they are on this journey. And I just fundamentally have appreciated the support along the way.
You gave a keynote speech, I understand, called How to Make Impossible Missions Possible. What was that all about?
That was, that was going back a few years. I was invited by Roche Diagnostics. They were bringing all of their team together over in Portugal, actually. And I knew them because they were a customer of mine back in the Celestica days. And after I had left Celestica, they said, "Hey, Sandra, would you come and give us a talk?" And so it was really all about, perseverance and resilience, and making impossible missions possible. Because if you think about what sorts of things Roche was doing, and especially the diagnostics division was doing, the technology and the science behind it, it really feels a little bit like making impossible missions possible. But there's so many awesome examples out there. It was a lot of fun to share some of my own experiences about how I approach the so-called impossible situation and moment.
You've got some great words that you use to describe making the impossible possible. Resilience, creativity, commitment, courage, and relentless focus.
For sure. And I remember talking to them about one of my favorite examples. So I'm a huge Bruce Springsteen fan. I have to put a little shout out for him. But it's a great example of somebody that was just so incredibly talented, but unknown. Took a lot of resilience and commitment and passion for him to be told some of the things in his early parts of his career that he was told, and then go back and write a song like Born to Run. It was those are examples, I think, that I draw on from outside the business world that really inspire me on a day-to-day basis.
But then let me read another paragraph that you've got here. Missions are made possible by building great teams, which is my favorite part of any leadership role. Fostering strengths, coaching weaknesses, granting opportunities, and challenging people to achieve things they never thought they could. So what is it about teams that is so important?
I think that, the job of any leader is to not be the person that's the doer all the time or any of the time. It is about bringing the best of every person that's in a team, and that's where you get the magic to happen, right? If I think about what's happening at Spectrum right now, I have an incredible team there that day in and day out are figuring out how to do things that we never had to do before, or address challenges that we've never had to address before. And I think what is exciting for me, and what's been challenging for me in some ways, is to try and do this in a virtual world where we're not always together. We have been together a little bit more and throughout the summer and fall, but we've been trying to do a lot of this over Zoom conversations. But it's really about feeding the energy of individual folks, bringing their unique skills and capabilities to the table, seeing how all of that fits together, and it starts fitting together like a glove. And then, all together, they're able to do something that they never thought that they'd be able to do. And that honestly is what gets me up every day. I'm a person that feeds off of everybody else's energy. I like being into the office for that exact reason. I don't like working from home because people are just amazing, resilient creatures. We just all have this unique and innate need to continue to drive forward, whatever the circumstances are. And when you put that all together into a team, I think that's where you can get the 1 + 1 = 3 equation to really happen.
Can you build a team? Can you build a culture virtually, or do you have to meet face to face?
Yeah, I've had lots of debates about that with people over the last few years. I'm a big, you need to be in person kind of person. And it's not to say that there's not a role for remote work. Some of our staff for sure we've had remotely. But I think when you think about culture, culture is based on relationship and approach and style, and how that team forms. I think is really, really difficult to do that in a very remote way where you're not bringing teams together on a regular basis. Culture is for sure, it's top down in many ways. It's setting example, emulating behaviors and characteristics that everybody else in the organization can see. But then it's also about recognizing and rewarding and lifting up folks that are doing amazing things. And yeah, it's really, really difficult to do that virtually. So I'm back in the office most days and have been. Our branches, we sent them home in wave 1 and it really just didn't work that well. So we brought them back and they've been back in the office since then in very safe ways. But partly because the team-based culture, the drive, what they need to do every day, the amount of change and churn coming at us, it would have been impossible to do it virtually.
Given your last name, I got to ask you, are you related to Fred Ketchen?
I am. Fred was my uncle, my dad's older brother. There was 6 Ketchens in the family. They're all from the Mississauga West End area. But yeah, just an amazing guy, an amazing role model for all of us, my cousins included. I have many of them.
Tell me a little bit about him, if you could.
Oh, Fred was, in many ways what you see or what you saw back in the day on TV, when people would see him on TV or hear him on radio. He was interesting because he started his life out in journalism. That's what he wanted to do. And he ended up in the financial market sector and had obviously a wildly successful career doing that. And ultimately was able to bring back kind of one of his loves, is what he had originally intended to do, brought that back into his career. So, just a real pillar of the community, carried on a lot of the work that my grandparents, my grandfather had started. He was a very much a give back to the community kind of guy. And I think Fred had continued that legacy as well in terms of the different hospital gifts and things that he's done. So yeah, just an amazing role model. But all the Ketchen clan really were. There were 3 boys and 3 girls, and they're all super amazing people.
Your father passed away this past year. My condolences. But you then wrote a blog on what my dad taught me about leadership and family that I've read, and it's really quite interesting. Tell me a little bit about this article, if you could.
I just, it was hard for me to process what was happening, and before my dad died, I wanted to be able to relay to him what it was that he had done for me. He was by far my biggest cheerleader all the way through my life, and especially into my career. And so I found it was hard for me to find the words to say it in person. So I wrote it down on paper. And what I published was sort of an abbreviated, edited version of what I shared with him before he died, and maybe a handful of days before he passed. I read this to him, and it was, he had given me this book when I was turning 21 by G. Kingsley Ward. It was called Letters of a Businessman to His Daughter. And that's what kind of inspired the idea, because, he was all about working hard and being fair and being empathetic, but at the same time, not kind of losing yourself in the process, and, what's important in life. And taught me things like, what is it about, what does client satisfaction and customer service really mean? Why is it important to maintain family and friend connections? They were just moments of my life that I wanted to piece together and play back for him. And for sure, it was a hard thing for him to listen to, and I think for me to read to him, but certainly something that I'm really glad that I did.
I got to read for everyone some of these lessons that you said that your father taught you. Lesson number 1 was the customer is always right. And you've got a great little story here about your father. And you said that you thought my dad was a magician. It took me many years to really understand something. He already knew that customer service isn't about right and wrong. Rather, it's about the customer's perception of their experience. Number 2 lesson is rewards come from taking risks. And you go through a bunch of different risks that you and your father took. Lesson 3, work-life balance is about choice and being present. Lesson number 4, small acts of kindness and encouragement matter. And lesson number 5, have some fun along the way. Have you been able to have fun along the way?
I have. He has taught me that. I've had the opportunity to have amazing experiences. I've traveled the world. Was actually able to meet up with my parents in Asia on one of my last trips there several years ago. It was a place that they'd never been, had always wanted to be. So I've had the chance to have amazing experiences. I have an awesome couple of daughters, kind of starting to chart their own path. I have an amazing extended family and friends group that. It really is about, I think, being in the moment and just cherishing it all, because it goes fast. It doesn't feel like it's going fast when you're in your 20s, but you start to get on the other side of 50, and I think it feels like it's accelerating a little bit.
Lesson number 3 is work-life balance is about choice and being present. And you describe watching Hockey Night in Canada with your father, and you also describe how he blow dried your hair, which has got to be a unique experience for a father and a daughter. Have you been able to have a work-life balance? You've been a successful CEO. You've had a lot of different jobs. Can you have both? Lots of people wonder if you can have it both. Have everything.
I think it depends on how you define work-life balance, and for some people, they might define work-life balance is I'm only going to work 40 hours or 35 hours, and then I'm home. And when I'm home, I'm not doing any work. And there's a clear division between those things. And that's totally fine for those people. I think it really depends on what's important to you and how you can define and cope with it. For me, I had big ambitions. I wanted to grow and expand in my career and have different experiences, which then included, literally traveling all kinds of different parts of the world, which meant I was away for weeks at a time. I had an incredibly supportive family around me that enabled me to do that. But then when I was home, I really tried to be home. If I was having to do night calls with Asia, it was after the kids went to bed so that I could be there to put them in bed, read them a story. And we've talked about, did that affect them? Did that challenge them? And my younger daughter had said to me, well, no, Mom, I actually think it was good in that, it teaches us that we can do and be whatever we want. But I think it really, Brian, it comes down to choice. I don't feel like I've deprived my children of me or my time. As they got older, that's when I actually pulled back out of global travel, and I came into home care, which was more national travel, which felt much more easy. And I could spend more time with them as they were going through kind of later high school or early university years.
Is that a piano I see behind you?
That is, yep, that's a piano back there.
Do you play?
I do. I've played since I was 8 years old. It's a great stress relief. It's just something that I love. I'm a big music fan to begin with. So we're a sort of musical family, if you will, parts of us, and it's just something that I immensely enjoy.
What else do you do to relieve stress?
Well, I work out. I work out 4 times a week. I think physical activity is a good thing. That includes walking my dog. I do that a fair bit too. I think fresh air, just sort of rejuvenating mind, body, and spirit, if you will. I'm cautious and careful about trying to take time, to go spend time with family, with friends. And I'm pretty good at separating business and pressure and stress from the moment that I'm with somebody or hanging out or on vacation. I can disconnect pretty well. And I think it is important that people continue to do that, especially with what we've been experiencing the last 2 years. It's crazy making. There's no two ways about it. It's crazy making. The restrictions, the lockdowns, the isolation. So I think, people have to be really specific about what it is that they're doing. And I think that's what I find in these things that I enjoy.
We're chatting tonight with Sandra Ketchen. She's the president and CEO of Spectrum Healthcare. It's one of the largest providers of home care and specialized services in Ontario. She's got 2,500 staff servicing 25,000 clients in the Greater Toronto Area. Fascinating conversation. We're going to take a final break and come back with some concluding comments in just a minute. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga Night 60. We're chatting tonight with Sandra Ketchen. She is the president and CEO of Spectrum Healthcare. It's one of the largest providers of home care and specialized services in Ontario. We've had a really good conversation about home care, about healthcare, about technology, about leadership, about lessons her dad taught her. It's been interesting. Sandra, let me ask you a personal question. Can I ask you a personal question?
Sure.
So I understand you're single. What's it like, being a female CEO of a company has got to be pretty intimidating to a lot of guys. What's that like dating? Or do you date?
Maybe, I'm not sure. I hope not. What's it been like? It's been, it's obviously been a challenge like everybody else that's out there in single world. The pandemic, it's been difficult for us. I'm very fortunate that I've got two daughters that I'm very close to, and I've got a dog that I love that's been my sidekick through the whole thing. And I think, if anybody has enjoyed the pandemic, it's all the animals out there with all their humans at home. But yeah, it's a challenge meeting people to begin with. And then, meeting people that can understand what it is that I do on a day-to-day basis and my commitment to the organization and to the patients that we serve. But at the same time, it's important for everybody to have that human connection, right? That's, I think, probably what I miss the most. So finding ways to create that human connection, I have found that in the interim through some awesome friends that I have, a large and extended friend group that take pity on me on a regular basis and host me at their cottages or at their homes. And people always said, hey, Sandra, when it's meant to happen, it's going to happen. So I hold out hope in the background.
We talked earlier about one of the lessons your dad taught you is work-life balance. Can you have a spouse when you're a CEO?
Definitely. Definitely. I think so. But I think it comes from a place where people are aligned to each other's goals and objectives and supportive of each other's goals and objectives. And, it's not necessarily for everybody. And what I am and what I do may not be for everybody out there. But I think for the right one, it is possible.
You said you want to leave with a message of gratitude about home healthcare.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that opportunity, Brian, because I think that, when I watch the news that everybody else is watching, there's a lot of recognition being given to the hospital workers and the long-term care workers, and all very well deserved. Absolutely. Those people are standing on their heads doing what they're doing. But what drives me crazy is there's really little recognition of all of the tens of thousands of home care workers across the province that are doing the exact same thing. I saw a picture on LinkedIn the other day of a home care worker wearing snowshoes in the recent blizzard, trying to get up driveways to the patient houses because they needed his care. He was a nurse. And I just want to send a message of gratitude to all of those folks out there for what they do on a daily basis, especially to my Spectrum team, that we see you. And I think, in the past, home care has been this invisible army. And what I'm excited about going forward with all of this recognition coming and starting and growing, that we don't have to be the invisible army any longer, that we can really be visible. And I'm excited to do that in partnership with, the government's support and investments and support them in some of the change and transformation initiatives that they're trying to drive forward. So to all the home care workers out there, we see you, we love you, we have so much gratitude for what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Sandra Ketchen, we have heard you and we see you. And we think you're fantastic. And thank you so much for joining us. You've been an inspiration in a couple of different ways. I think that your comments about making the impossible possible were really helpful. I think your comments about the lessons your father taught us is heart warming and really great lessons. I think the example that you provide of a female that has been so successful in engineering with Celestica and then now with Spectrum Healthcare are inspirational to everybody. And I think your comments about home healthcare and the trends and how these personal care workers and nurses can really aid us with living out our lives at home, I think is very helpful. And so thank you for all of those different issues that we've talked about today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's my show for tonight. Thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm on to remind you every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. All my podcasts and videocasts are available on briancrombie.com. The videos are on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and the podcasts are on Audible, Apple, and Speakeasy Podcasts. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Good night. Sandra, really appreciate meeting you. Thank you. Good night, everybody.